So I'll go ahead and we'll get started with this. If people come in, it's still pretty early, they can catch on. We
Okay.
have a lovely guest speaker today, Marcia Montenegro. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, Marcia.
Marcia,
Marcia.
okay.
Yeah, you said the last
Gotcha.
name right.
Oh, good, half right. She is presenting on New Age versus Wicca versus Witchcraft. She was an astronomer for 8 years. She did 2 years
Sorry, Julie, astrologer.
astrologer.
Yeah, big difference.
We'll learn what that is tonight.
Okay, I'll try to squeeze that in.
Yeah. She studied for 2 years. She did take a board exam, which was 7 hours long, that she passed, and she was a member of that board for 4 years and chaired it for 3. She was president of the Metropolitan Atlanta Astrological Society for 1 year and chaired on the curriculum committee, as well as, if anyone listens to Cultish, the podcast, she has been on there a couple times. So if you want some extra information, you can find her there afterwards. So, but I'm just going to let her take it away, and we'll do announcements and such at the end.
Okay, great. Okay, well, good evening. It's great to be here. Well, to kind of be here to see you guys. Yes, my background is in the New Age. I was in it for probably at least 20 years. I was, it's hard to know where do you have the beginning point. It's not like one day I wasn't in it and the next day I was, it's a gradual immersion over time, usually. And I was a professional astrologer, very involved in astrology, saw everything through the world of astrology. And just because she said astronomy, and I wanted to point out that astrology and astronomy are very, very different. Astronomy is a science and based on a study of the physical, the physical space and heavenly bodies. Astrology is an occult art that is based on the belief that the position of the planets and the sun and moon represent events in your life or the life of a country or whatever the chart's being done for. So you can do a chart for a city or a country. So the position of the planets and the sun and the moon in that particular chart for that particular time and place are interpreted by the astrologer with certain meanings. So basically you were reading a hidden meaning into the planet and the zodiac sign, which of course that's partly what divination is. So divination is condemned throughout the Old and New Testament. And what God is talking about there is occult forms of divination, and that would include astrology, tarot card reading, palm reading, tea leaf reading. Divination is there's a whole lot of it's a very big area. The I Ching is divination. You can make almost anything into divination if you want, a pendulum, using a pendulum is divination. So it's a really, really big area. I have an article on my website, christiananswersforthenewage.org. And I'm going to probably refer to things on my website as I speak. So it would be good for you to know where that is. And I have a Facebook page, ministry Facebook page called Christian Answers for the New Age that you can like and follow. And I post there quite frequently on New Age and occult topics. So that's a page where I do more there than I do put a lot of articles on my website, but it takes a lot longer to put an article on my website than it does to write a post on Facebook. So I put up a lot of stuff on Facebook more than I put articles on my website. Now, just to say something about, we're going to talk about Wicca, witchcraft, and the New Age. So I want to start off with the New Age and then go into Wicca and witchcraft, because there is some overlap there, and it's better to start, I think, with the New Age, which is a very huge, vast area, and which I feel like most Christians really don't know what, most of them don't know what it is, and they certainly don't know how to define it. And it's actually hard to define it. So I have come up with my own definition, which is it's a network of beliefs. Okay, so it's not one belief, it's a network of beliefs that stem from Gnosticism, Eastern religions, and the New Thought movement. So those are the three areas that the New Age draws from. And then there are other things that were part of those three things I just mentioned that the New Age draws from. But those are the three big main areas. So I think most of you have probably heard of the Gnostics, right? Do you guys know what I mean when I say that? Do you know about the Gnostics and the early church? Is there
Does
does
anybody
anybody
not
know?
know? Anybody
Huh?
not know? Raise your hand.
Do you
Okay.
not know? Okay. Okay,
They
good.
don't
Thank
know.
you. All right. The Gnostics, Gnosticism was really another network of beliefs that developed starting around the 1st century, but really didn't flourish until the 2nd and 3rd centuries. But the beginnings of it were already going on at the time the New Testament was being written. And there are actually references to it, of course, not using the word Gnostic, but there are references to it in 1st John, in Colossians, and in some other 1st Timothy or 2nd Timothy, where he talks about myths, people turning to myths. What this was there was these Jewish myths, which they weren't from God. These were mythological type tales, and Gnosticism came from that, along with mixing in with Christianity. So it was sort of this mixture of things, and stories would be retold, like the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis. There was another version of that was the early Gnostic version. And then as far as Jesus went, the Gnostic Jesus was, the Gnostics believed that we are all trapped in bodies, that we're all spirit, we're all from God, but we got trapped in bodies. And there's real complicated stories about how that happened. And we got trapped in bodies. And so in order to be free of this body, we have to have secret knowledge given to us. And so the Gnostics were very big on knowledge. And I think there's some letter where Paul says something like that, which is called knowledge, where he's kind of referring to this. So the New Testament writers, most of them were aware of this and were writing against it because it was infiltrating the churches. And in fact, Jude says this when he says, he talks about the false teachers coming in. I'm not saying they're necessarily Gnostics, but some of them probably were. So this was infiltrating the church. So they believed that matter was evil, and to be in matter, to be in a body was evil, and you had to escape, and you had to have secret knowledge to escape. So that was one of the main ideas behind Gnosticism. And that is something that you can see in the New Age, because the New Age always makes what they call spiritual superior to matter. So everything's spiritualized in the New Age. Everything is spiritual. And matter is a lower, denser form of energy. And the idea is that in order to be more spiritual, you have to accelerate spiritually so that you become either less attached to the material world, less attached to the body, or you can also have the view that the material world is just an illusion and doesn't actually exist, but it's a projection of our consciousness. So there's all kinds of, there's a lot of variations in the New Age. And I'm just throwing out a few of the main ones, but there's this split between matter and spirit, where spirit is superior and matter is usually inferior. Yet at the same time, matter expresses the spiritual. So this is why New Agers are so into health, because your body and your health is a reflection of your spiritual state. Now remember, not remember, but the spiritual state this is important to know, in the New Age does not have to do with good and evil. This is not what they're concerned with. They're not concerned with good and evil. They're concerned with advancing spiritually. Sometimes there's the concern with positive versus negative. That can be a big part of it. So that's some of the Gnostic influence. The Eastern spiritual influence comes from Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And I'm sure all of you have seen the yin yang symbol, right? Have you seen the yin yang symbol? That comes from Taoism. Actually, there's a lot of things from Taoism in this culture. There's much more influence than you may think, usually in the alternative health field. So Taoism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, in all three of those, there's again an idea of needing to escape the material world. Okay, in Hinduism, you have reincarnation, where you die and come back and live again and again. Buddhism also has rebirth. And in Taoism, they have the same idea. So what you have in common with the New Age there is reincarnation. Most people in the New Age believe in reincarnation. Not all of them, but most of them. And that comes mainly from the Hindu views. And then a lot of the practices, the forms of meditation that are done in the New Age are based on Hindu and Buddhist forms of meditation, which I learned myself. So I did Hindu meditation. I was involved with a Tibetan Buddhist group for a brief period of time, and I learned to do Tibetan Buddhist meditation. And then I got into Zen Buddhism for 12 years, and I did mindfulness for 12 years, which is the Zen Buddhist meditation, which is now kind of a trend in this culture, mindfulness. So that word is everywhere. I started tracking it in 2011. I started posting on Facebook. I have 4 or 5 articles on my website on it. I did a whole talk on it for another Ratio Christi group. So I'm not going to start in on it right now, or I'll spend the rest of the time talking about it. But that's a big area that you should know about. Maybe you can read one of my articles. And the latest article I have is called Taming the Monkey. And that is about mindfulness, because they talk about the monkey mind. So what you have with all this Eastern spiritual stuff is, again, kind of a downgrading of the material, and the idea that you have to escape, that there needs to be an escape from rebirth, an escape from reincarnation, an escape from this world. And so a lot of teachings and techniques and practices are all oriented towards that. That's the purpose of them, is to help you do something so that you can advance and escape. So in the New Age, you also usually have the idea of reincarnation and the idea that you're restricted by being in this world and being in this body. So they're always kind of, in the New Age, they're always very future oriented and transcendent oriented. They're always looking to what's beyond and what's in the future. This is the New Age is just geared that way. It's just this, it's kind of this constant idea of moving forward. You have to be spiritually advancing. So you go to different teachers, you read different books, you do different things that are supposed to help you spiritually advance. I mean, everything from diets, to meditation practices, and going to an astrologer, going to a psychic who can give you insight on your spiritual status, maybe, or what are your lessons in this life that you need to learn, because if you don't learn them, then you're going to have to repeat them in the next life. So, I mean, that's the kind of advice I would give my clients when I was an astrologer. I would talk about their lessons in this lifetime. So that's a big part of the New Age, the Eastern ideas. And I have an article on my website on the Eastern religious influence on the New Age, which kind of, it's a summary. It's not a long article. It's kind of a short article. So it's sort of an overview. Then New Thought, the New Thought movement. I'm curious to know if any of you have ever heard of that, or you know what I'm talking about. Do any of you know? Nope. Okay, have any of you heard of the Christian Science Church? Okay, several of you have heard of that. the Christian Science Church came out of the New Thought movement. So the New Thought movement has a very complex history, but it started kind of in the late 18th century. Then it really kind of built up in the 1800s and sort of blossomed around 1900 and the early 20th century. The New Thought movement is kind of a Christianized Gnosticism. It's not New Age, but the New Age adopted a lot of New Thought ideas, and they sound very similar. And sometimes I can't even tell whether someone is New Thought or New Age. They might actually be a bit of both. And I'll give you an example of someone kind of famous who is like that, and that's Oprah. She's really a New Thought follower, but she's also kind of New Agey. So the New Thought movement claims to be Christian. This is very important. They claim to be Christian, and they'll use the word Christian. They use the Bible. They talk about Jesus, but this is what they believe. They believe that all of us have a divine nature because we all come from God. And Jesus recognized his divine nature. And because he recognized his divine nature, that gave him Christ consciousness. So this term Christ consciousness, which is very popular in the New Age, comes from New Thought. So Christ consciousness is the awareness of your real inner self, your inner divine self. And that you're supposed to develop this Christ consciousness. This is how you spiritually advance. And so in New Thought, Jesus is really a man like everybody else. He's just a man with advanced spiritual understanding. And then everybody has this divine nature. And so there's no need for sin. I mean, no need for salvation. Sin is usually redefined, or it's just completely rejected. There's no concept of sin. There's no concept of a holy God. God is kind of impersonal. God is actually talked about more in impersonal terms. And this is true in the New Age too. So God's kind of pushed off to this. God becomes this force or energy that we all come from. And then Jesus is like this. In the New Age, he's often a spiritual master or some kind of advanced soul who's reincarnated many times. And the New Thought movement is very big on the belief that to advance spiritually, they also kind of have this Gnostic view that the body is just this temporary vehicle. So the idea that we are not bodies with souls. We are souls that happen to have a body. I've actually seen Christians post this on Facebook, which really upsets me because this is not a Christian concept at all. This is a New Thought, New Age concept. We are made by God with a physical body. Our body is not just a vehicle for our spirit. Okay, so I mean, after all, look at the central event of Christianity is what? What's the central event? In 1 Corinthians 15, he says, this is the gospel, the first few verses. Do you know what it is? What's the main event in Christianity?
Christ dying?
Huh?
Jesus dying?
What happened the third day after he was crucified? Yeah. Resurrection. That's the central event of Christianity. Without the resurrection, Paul says, there is no gospel. Resurrection. So, and he was resurrected, his body, right? He was in his body. He had the nail marks. He showed them to Thomas. So our body is not just this temporary vehicle that we lose when we die. We are separated from the body at death. But one day, and 1 Corinthians 15, the whole chapter is about this. It's about how we will have a new body, but it's still our body. So it's transformed, it's glorified, just like the body of Jesus after the resurrection. So this shows that the body is an important thing. Plus, when God created Adam and Eve, he gave them bodies, right? And then he breathed life into them and they came alive. Okay. So a lot of people try to analyze that too much. I think we just have to go by what the Bible says. We don't really know, what did God do? We don't know. We know he made them alive. So you see here, Christianity right away with the bodily resurrection of Jesus is very much at odds with the New Age and with New Thought. So the New Age took a lot of new thought ideas. They also teach things like affirmations, positive thinking. This is very big in New Thought. So affirmations are where you say something or write something down over and over, and by doing this, you attract it to you. So, but you write it in a positive way. So, for example, if you want a new car, then you should be specific about the kind of car you want. So you want a 2023 Jaguar. I don't know what's the only car I can think of right now. That would be pretty expensive. You would write out, I have a new royal blue 2023 Jaguar. I don't even know if they have 2023 cars out yet. And then you write that down, you think it, try to get a picture if there are pictures of such a thing, and you put it up. And by believing it and investing yourself into it like this, you can make it a reality, because they believe that everything in existence is manifested from some other invisible plane. And so you can bring it from that invisible plane or dimension into this world through these techniques. And that's what affirmations are for. They can be about health. They don't have to be about objects. They could be about health, or they could be about, a partner, a love interest, whatever it is that you set your mind on. So that's also a thing that is in the New Age that comes from New Thought. Okay, so I've given you an overview there. I want to check the time here. And the reason it's important to go into the New Age, first of all, I want you to see the difference between that and classic Wicca and witchcraft. But then also, it's good to know it because a lot of people in Wicca and witchcraft are also into the New Age. They combine the two. So, you can find people who call themselves Wiccans who also believe in reincarnation or do Buddhist meditation, or something like that. So they're not restricted. Nobody's telling them they can't do that. And a lot of times they have interest in those areas. So they're kind of like a New Age witch. Now there are people in witchcraft and Wicca who are not into most of these New Age things, and they're all into the Wicca and witchcraft stuff, which is a little different. Now I had a lot of Wiccan and witch clients as an astrologer. Some of them were also friends. My chiropractor was a practicing witch. And she actually she had a whole stack of my business cards, and she would give them out to all her clients and tell them what a great astrologer I was, because she was one of my clients, and her partners were also my clients. So I was very much in touch with a lot of Wiccans and witches, even though I myself was not practicing that particular religion. It's actually considered a religion, I think, by the Supreme Court. So I think I'm going to move on to Wicca and witchcraft. If I think of some more things about the New Age, I'll tell you, but I've given you kind of a big overview there. Does that do you feel like you know more than you did about the New Age? Does that help
Absolutely.
you? Okay.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
And let me say a couple more things. It can be hard to recognize because there's not always a definite thing that's there that causes you to recognize it. It's you have to kind of look for several things for what the worldview is. But the New Age, one reason it has infiltrated this culture so heavily, and the church, is because it always appears positive and helpful and beneficial. Okay, it never It never appears negative or like it's evil or anything like that. It always looks positive and helpful. And sometimes it even appears to be Christian. So this is one reason that it is so influential on the culture and in the church, because in the culture, it's just taking, I mean, it's taking over the health field for sure. And it has, Buddhism has incredibly influenced the field of psychology. And I've been tracking that, and I've done some Facebook posts on that. So these kind of things are in our culture. They're here, and they're not going away because people feel that they're beneficial and they feel that they're getting something from it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Wicca and witchcraft. So Wicca and witchcraft, I will talk about them sometimes as though they're the same thing, although there is a distinction. But here we go with, it depends on who you ask, which is how it is with Wicca and witchcraft. You can't even get a definition of it from people. It's very, very difficult. And Wiccans don't always think people who call themselves witches are really doing witchcraft. And a lot of witches look down on people who call themselves Wiccans, and they don't think they're really doing witchcraft. So some of them make a very strong distinction between those two areas. But Wicca is actually a very specific thing that was started by a man named Gerald Gardner in England. He was very interested in the occult and in secret groups. He supposedly was a Freemason for a while. And he also met a man named Aleister Crowley. Have any of you heard of Aleister Crowley?
Not good things.
One guy there on the end knows who Aleister Crowley is. People who are into music from the 60s would know about Aleister Crowley. He had an influence on some of the musicians. He was dead, but Aleister Crowley was a very infamous character. He was raised in a very strict Church of Brethren household, but he was very rebellious. He liked to call himself the Beast, and he used the number 666 for himself. He got involved in ritual magic and some very unsavory forms of magic with a woman partner. He was very provocative. He liked to shock people. So he was very out there. He was very, very much a fringe character. He was born in the, I think like the 1888 or something like that, but he lived until I think he lived until the 1940s, I think. I have to double check that. He was into contact with angels. So a lot of his magic has to do with contact with conjuring up angels. And this is part of ritual or ceremonial magic. He was not a Satanist. I see a lot of stuff online sometimes that calls Aleister Crowley a Satanist. He was not a Satanist. However, he had a motto that was called, his motto was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And he claimed to get this from his spirit guide. And his spirit guide supposedly told him this, and he wrote a whole book called the Book of the Law. And so his motto, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," means that your will is supreme over everything. You exert your will over everything. That's how you do magic. Magic is bending reality to your will. So you bend reality to your will. Now, a lot of modern Satanists, and I'm not going to do a talk on Satanism, but I actually just did an interview on Satanism that should be up maybe in 2 weeks or so. I'll be posting it on my Facebook page. It's the only full interview I've ever done on Satanism. Usually when I talk about it, it's for 5 or 10 minutes. So this was like a whole hour of Satanism. So the modern Satanists, and actually Satanism is a modern religion, they adopted Aleister Crowley's, they adopted his motto, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." So because of that, a lot of people connect Aleister Crowley with Satanism, even though he wasn't a Satanist. Now, I know it kind of went off the trail there, but it's kind of important to know about him in terms of just everything else, because he pops up here and there. And Gerald Gardner, who was the founder of Wicca, supposedly met him. And the reason I had to tell you about Aleister Crowley is that Gerald Gardner took that motto, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and he changed it so that it says, "Do what thou wilt, but do no harm." Now that's the motto. Most Wiccans and many witches will say they follow that as their kind of their guide or their rule. Do what thou wilt, but do no harm. And that's what Gerald Gardner came up with that. And he started teaching people in England. He claimed he had been initiated into witchcraft, and he claimed that witchcraft was an ancient religion. And he used the material of a woman whose name has gone out of my head now. I think her name is Margaret something. She wrote a book about witchcraft. She was an anthropologist, but her material was completely debunked. She didn't really historically support her claims in her book about witchcraft. But Gerald Gardner took it as though it was true. And he started teaching what he claimed that he was teaching ancient witchcraft, but he was actually using his own ideas and some of the things that he got from Freemasonry. So he was kind of mixing in things he had learned, and he was saying it was the ancient religion of witchcraft, but he got quite a few followers. And one of those followers came to the United States in 1963. And he started his own witchcraft groups here in the United States. And that's when it started here. And it grew from there from 1963 on. And then there was another man in England who split off from Gerald Gardner and started his own version of Wicca. And he had followers who then came to the United States. And so what you have in this country, you have people who are practicing a very traditional Gardnerian style of witchcraft, which is how Gerald Gardner taught it, and then other people who are practicing variations. And there are variations on variations on variations, because there's no limit. You know, there's nobody to limit you. There's no like strict creed or statement of beliefs that anybody follows. They're just kind of these general ideas that they tend to follow. So people can come up with their own thing. But some of the things that they have in common are, of course, that they believe that the earth is sacred. A lot of them will say the earth is our mother. They're very, very nature oriented. Nature is the model. Nature is the role model for everything. So what happens in nature is always good. Even if it looks bad, it's good. So they believe in nature is sacred. You honor nature, you honor the seasons, the cycles of nature. All the rituals are built around the changes in the seasons. You also honor the feminine. There's the idea of the feminine power being very strong. This is why Wicca and witchcraft attract a lot of women. And that's being really emphasized today. And it's attracted like a lot of younger women in Generation Z, which I guess some of you guys are, let's see, how old are you guys? Like 18 or so? Are you like are you the end of the millennials? Or are you the beginning of Generation Z? I'm not sure. I think the line.
The oldest of us are millennials, but most everyone in here is not a millennial.
Oh, okay. So there are a lot of Generation Z people. Okay.
Millennials are out of college. They're all 26 or older.
Okay. I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago to get the ages, and then I kind of figured it out and then I forgot it. So yeah, I was thinking they were more in their 20s now. I did on the cultish program, if you know that, I did a 2-part program on witchcraft with them. And the second part was about the witches on TikTok, because apparently there's like millions of TikTok witchcraft followers. And there are all these TikTok witches that were making little 30-second videos. And so they played them on the program, and then I would respond to what was being said. So that's online. Somewhere Cultish has that online if you're interested in that. And these are all like, most of them are younger, you know, really young people. who are into witchcraft and talking about it. So you have all these variations on Wiccan witchcraft now. So I talked about the earth. Then casting spells, of course, is a part of it, is a big part of it. And casting spells, it's not like you say abracadabra and then, you know, something magical happens. Casting spells has to do with tapping into a force or energy. And it can even be viewed as an energy within yourself. So you can tap or an energy within yourself or in nature. And that's where magic is coming from. It's not seen as supernatural, it's seen as natural by most people in Wicca. It's seen as natural. There's also the elementals. Those are nature spirits, and there are witches who specialize in working with what they call the nature spirits. So they actually will contact or believe they're contacting these nature spirits. Then there's the belief in the goddess. Okay, the goddess is usually a big part of Wicca, and she has a consort, but she's much more powerful than her consort. And then many times, but not always, there's a belief in many gods. So they have many gods and goddesses. They're into this god and goddess thing big time. Now, they may not believe that the gods and goddesses are actually real. Sometimes they believe they're just symbolic of certain energies. And sometimes they believe these are energies within ourselves, and they just have taken this outward form. So you're going to get different views on who the gods and who the goddess is and the gods and goddesses, and is there just the goddess or more than one god? You're going to have a variation on that. So that's Wicca. Now, witchcraft, just kind of, it's kind of just happened. I don't know that anybody really knows when it happened. Okay, let me say this first about, this is important because it gets very confusing here. In your Bible, in the Old Testament, you have in certain passages, you have the word witchcraft or witch in certain versions of the Bible, like the King James. But you have witchcraft, and there is no Hebrew word for witchcraft. So when they were writing that, they weren't actually writing what we think of as witchcraft. What happened is that the Hebrew words are describing certain occult practices such as divination and contact with the dead. And those words got translated as witchcraft, because witchcraft, before the modern religion of witchcraft, basically before the 20th century, the word witchcraft just meant the practice of the occult. It's a generic term that means the practice of the occult. So, you know, doing something occultic, doing astrology could be called witchcraft, or trying to contact the dead could be called witchcraft. So you have this generic term, and then you have the specific religion of witchcraft and people who call themselves witches. And see, those aren't exactly the same thing. And there's a lot of confusion that comes from that. So be aware of that, because it will help you if you talk to anybody into this stuff, just to understand this background of the word, because the word witchcraft can be used, and then in other cultures as well. Overseas, the word witchcraft tends to have the generic meaning, especially if you get into non-Western countries like Africa or South America. When they talk about witches, they don't mean somebody who's following Wicca or someone who's following the religion of witchcraft like in the United States. So it looks very different in other countries. Not so much maybe in Europe. It may be similar in Europe, especially in England, to what it is here, or the UK. But other places like South America and Africa are very different. So witches, people who call themselves witches, some of them believe that they inherited this, that this came through their bloodline, that you know, their great grandmother was a witch, or their grandmother was a witch, and so they inherited it. And some of them believe that you have to inherit it to be a witch. Now, I don't think most of them believe that, but some of them believe it. They do believe, and this is true in Wicca too, that you have to be initiated into it. So usually there's some kind of way that you have to be initiated. Usually it's supposed to take a year and a day to be initiated. And I think one reason that Wicca and witchcraft attract people is because it makes you feel very special. Wiccans and witches are very inviting, they're very welcoming to people. And so if you're interested in it and you express that interest and you're around somebody who practices it, they will be extremely nice. I mean, they will take you under their wing. And you will feel, I mean, probably not just them, but maybe other people in that community, in the witchcraft or Wicca community, and you'll be taken in and accepted no matter what. Doesn't matter what your gender is, doesn't matter if you're, gay or bisexual, doesn't matter if you're, what race you are, whatever. They're very, very, very welcoming. So a lot of people who feel marginalized in society for whatever reason find acceptance in the witchcraft community. Now that's not the only, reason it does draw people like that, but I don't want to stereotype, because a lot of people in Wicca and witchcraft come from very comfortable backgrounds, had a lot of privilege growing up, but they felt this was their spiritual path. And they felt that this was really where they were destined to be. And what a lot of witches have told me when I've asked them what drew you to witchcraft or Wicca, what they say is because it made me feel at home. And that's what they'll say. It makes me feel at home. I feel like I'm home in witchcraft or Wicca. So they feel very comfortable with it, and they feel like they're a part of nature. They're a part of, the cycle of life and everything. And this, for some people, this is very comforting. This is what they want. And that's one of the big draws of Wicca and witchcraft that you don't find in the New Age. The New Age is not looking to find home, in this, they love nature, and they'll see nature as sacred because they believe there's a kind of a divine energy in everything. But they don't have this draw to nature and seeing nature as the model for everything that you see in Wicca and witchcraft. So that's a big difference with the New Age. So they'd have the casting spells. Now, here's another thing. They don't believe in casting spells to hurt people. They think that's wrong because whatever you do comes back to you 3 times, they believe. So they don't believe in doing spells to hurt people. They believe in doing spells to help people. They're very much into using herbs and things that they consider natural for healing. So they will often say that people who were healers in the Middle Ages were wrongly accused of witchcraft and, killed. And that's probably true. I think that a lot of that is probably true. Not all of it, but I think some of it's true. So they're into healing. Healing is also big in the New Age. Healing is a huge thing. Healing is absolutely gigantic in the New Age. It's a big part of the New Age, even more than in Wicca or witchcraft. Healing is huge. So you've got all kinds of healing from the New Age, like Reiki and all forms of energy healing. Reiki, healing hands. I think there's another one called hands of touching or something, healing touch. That's it. All these things that are energy healing. And actually, this is a form of sorcery. It's big in the New Age, but it's really an occult activity because you are trying to channel or manipulate an invisible energy that doesn't have any physical basis, doesn't have any way to be measured or quantified. And that's how I define sorcery, actually, is manipulating or channeling, contacting energy in order to use it for some kind of desired end. It could be for healing. So let's see, what else? Oh yeah, witches and Wiccans do not believe in Satan. So they are not worshiping Satan. They get very upset because people think that they worship Satan. They don't believe in Satan. They think that Christianity made Satan up to scare people into the church. So they don't believe in Satan. Now, they do believe, some of them do believe that there's evil, like evil spirits. They don't think these are demons, but they think they're these evil entities. And I've actually had a lot of witches tell me before I was a Christian and since I was a Christian that something was following them around, like a shadow has been following me around. There's this spirit that won't leave me alone. Okay. And they're scared of it. They tend to believe, I think they tend to believe more. They don't really believe in any absolutes, just like in the New Age, there's no absolutes, there's no absolute truth. Truth is what you experience. You find your truth through your experiences and your own spiritual understanding. But I find that in Wicca and witchcraft, there's more of an acceptance of the idea of good and evil than there is in the New Age. In the New Age, good and evil really aren't words that you even hear, especially the word evil. And certainly not the word sin. And New Thought also denies the existence of sin. But and Wicca and witchcraft doesn't talk about sin either, but they're more apt to be receptive to the idea of things that are evil. Okay, so you guys got to go.
Did y'all have any immediate questions?
Do you have any questions I can answer right away before you go? Because I'm about to open the floor for questions in a few minutes. Do you have anything? Nope.
Oh, no, they've been listening to you on Cultish, so they're experts.
Oh, okay. Good. All right. Thank you. Bye. Okay. So does this give you a better idea of Wicca and witchcraft? And it's different, the difference with the New Age. There's really a different, that Wicca and witchcraft is more oriented to the here and now, whereas the New Age is future and transcendent, out there oriented. And Wicca and witchcraft is more, you know, down here, more pragmatic and the here and now. But then, like I said earlier, there are witches who get into the New Age. So you can find an overlap there, you know, a witch who might cast spells and believe in the goddess, but she also has new age ideas too. Maybe she's doing affirmations or she's learning astrology. Certainly Wicca and witchcraft is totally open to things like astrology, you know, palm reading, especially forms of divination, maybe going to a psychic, or some witches might even consider themselves psychics. And so you can find people who mix all these areas all up. You know, there aren't sharp divisions between them. Okay, well, let me go ahead, and if I think of some more things, I'll say some more. I mean, there's certainly more that can be said, but I don't want to keep on because I feel like I wanted to give you some basic overviews of these areas and then just let you ask questions, because then that way you can, you know, you can find out what you need to know, hopefully.